Today's horror story is written by Archives Age. They call him the Mailbox Killer. I asked, turning from the glass to look at who was behind me. It was a police officer. Name's Detective Anders. I was in charge of this case before you government folks came in. Agent Rengage, I replied. Government's got me in charge of this case. I looked back towards the glass and beyond that, the interrogation cell in which the prisoner, one Chet Adami, draped in standard orange uniform sat, arms strapped to the table. He had this odd, crazed look on his face, like everything was going to be all right, as if he hadn't murdered 12 children. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. 3 months ago, a child went missing, a young boy around 7. At the time, police didn't make much of it. The community in which the child grew up in was shady at best, and at worst, well, pretty darn terrible. When an abandoned house's mailbox began to smell, and an elderly woman reported the stench to the police, a few cops checked it out. They had expected rotten food, drugs at worst. But no, they found the severed head of the child around 7. The house was cordoned off. More cops and a proper detective, Detective Anders, was brought in. In the subsequent days, the local postal service stopped by, one at a time to hand over cargo that was supposed to be delivered to the house. What the workers handed off to police, however, was no mere delivery, but rather small bits and pieces of the dead boy, all wrapped and preserved in tiny individual packages in some sick display of evil. Pure evil. Merely a week and a half later, a young mother reported her daughter missing. And then, 2 days from then, somehow across the entire nation, a house belonging to an elderly man's mailbox began to stink. The man opened, he found a package. A very small, head-shaped package. You can guess what happened next. Police arrived on the scene, cordoned it off, started their investigations. Of course, in the beginning, nobody knew to suspect these 2 cases were connected. By some trick of fate, it appeared the 2 detectives in charge of both cases were related. They were discussing their lives when they shared key details of the case, and suddenly, they had a killer on their hands. But still, they thought it a mere coincidence. Of course, only when the dead child's parts began to appear in the mail did they finally realize the connection. So, how did a killer manage to cross the entire US nation and set up an elaborate delivery system to show off their kill? That's what I was here to find out. Because after months of searching, the killer made a mistake. A single fingerprint was left behind on a girl's doll. A doll that I later saw to be covered in blood. But with that one fingerprint, agents before me were finally able to locate and arrest the killer, ending the maddening murders once and for all. And now, I was here to interrogate this so-called mailbox killer. Agent Rengage, Detective Anders said, tapping me on the shoulder. Yes, I replied. You've been approved. You can go in now. And so, I entered that room, pulled out a chair, and sat across from the soft-faced mailbox killer. Detective Anders, for his part, simply stood in the corner, watching and recording everything going on. So, you're the guy, huh? I commented, staring into his eyes. Someone, a dear friend, once told me you can tell the psychopaths by looking into their eyes, but it didn't seem to work here. Something about them seemed too innocent. Chet Adami?
I am Chet Adami,
He confirmed.
but I didn't kill anyone.
You didn't? I asked. Police found your fingerprint on that girl's doll. I slapped down the image of the bloody doll, crusted with the crimson red blood. How do you explain it? You had no other connection to the girl.
No.
Then would you care to explain yourself? I calmly questioned.
I didn't do it. They did.
Who's they? Is there something I should know? He hysterically whispered.
No, you wouldn't understand. They made me do it.
And who is they? I was losing my patience.
The children. They made me do it.
Sure. I think it's time we talked about the truth.
I'm not lying.
He seemed to snap. I wouldn't believe him, but somehow I felt the need to hear his explanation. To know what twisted mind ordered him to kill those kids. But then something in his eyes pleaded innocence, an almost childlike look to it. Fine. What's your story?
I am a teacher.
You taught the first student you killed. That's true. I remembered.
I taught the children well, and I didn't have a problem with any one of them. But then this kid, I didn't see him before. The one you say that I killed. I don't remember seeing him before, ever. Yet, when I asked him if he was lost, he spoke my name, and then told me he had always been in my class.
What does this have to do with anything?
Well,
The murderer continued.
I'm not sure, but for a brief second, his body just snapped. It was as if every bone in his body just grew out of him and folded in half. But then, before I could process what happened next, that thing was back to normal. He asked me if I'd seen a ghost, and he laughed this horrible laugh.
And then you killed him? I asked.
No, never.
Chet complained.
No, I'll explain.
Fine.
After school, as I walked back to my house, I saw the boy again. I tried to ignore him, but from the corner of my eye, I saw his body fold in half and snap, and made this horrible scraping noise. So I followed him for hours. I wanted to know where this horrible boy had come from. I went twists and turns and then an alleyway.
An alleyway?
Yes, it was a closed alleyway that led to nothing. Yet as I turned its corner, I saw the boy gone. So I walked forwards for a closer look and I saw this odd ring on the floor. And suddenly the boy called out my name from behind me. I turned around with the boy. He wasn't a boy. He wasn't human at all. His eyes were too big and his neck.
Explain.
It stretched up and up until it was towering over me. His arms were too long, too, and they began to reach out and towards me, and then, well, I blacked out. And the next thing I knew, I woke up to see myself in front of this house, holding something in my hands. I couldn't control myself, like something was puppeting me. I watched myself put this package inside the mailbox, and then I watched myself go home.
Then? I questioned.
I saw the rest of the body all over my kitchen. An arm there, a piece here, and it was all soaked in blood. I tried to close my eyes, but the thing, whatever was controlling me, it wanted me to see.
Wanted you to see?
What it had done to the poor boy. See, I wasn't the only one in that kitchen. I saw this long, slimy thing crawl out of my sink. This arm like a spider. And suddenly, it was out. No words. None can describe what I saw. You wouldn't understand. It had so many faces. All these faces that just screamed for help.
And?
Except for one. One of them was my head. Except, instead of crying out in pain like the others, it laughed. It laughed like it knew I was terrified. I wanted to faint. No, I needed to, but it made me see what that thing had done to the boy.
And how did the next murder happen?
Oh, dude, I don't fucking know. But the next thing I knew, well, I woke up. At first, I thought it'd be a really bad dream. I even checked the kitchen and everything, but there was nothing. Well, actually, there was a single speck of blood. But I just kind of ignored it. I think that I knew that it was all real, even if I didn't want to admit it.
Interesting, I muttered, taking notes.
So I went to school, taught the children. It was all fine for a while until one day I entered the school, but it wasn't the one that I taught. Then I saw a girl come up to me and say my full name. Her head split in two, and this mass of legs was inside of her. Oh, but that wasn't the worst part.
What's the worst part?
It was the voices.
The man sitting across from me shed a tear.
The endless crying and screaming, and above that, my laughter ringing through my screams, telling me how good of a dead girl she'd make. And then the girl spoke and told me to kill her, and then I blacked out after that.
Next?
The next thing that I remember is being at night, delivering a package to some house in the middle of the night. And then right after that, seeing myself wrap each and every bone the girl had in her body into gift boxes. And that thing, it made me watch while I did it. It was up on the ceiling, laughing and crying. And sometimes it would bend down a limb and eat one of the girl's bones. I felt myself crying, but there was nothing I could do.
And this went on and on, I questioned.
Yes, until finally I found myself the courage to stop that thing, whatever had taken control of my life.
Chet suddenly looked around the room, as if something was there with him, besides us.
Oh man, yeah, I had to stop it. That thing. So when it had put me in a daycare, and a little girl with a doll walked up to me, I tried with all my might, and I was able to tell that girl to run, pushing her doll by mistake as I did. I picked it up just before I blacked out.
And? I questioned.
Nothing changed. I found myself delivering this final package, but, well, the doll was in my hands. The thing was screaming at me to drop it, but somehow I was determined to deliver it as well as the head. I think subconsciously I knew that I needed to be stopped, to stop that thing from killing any more children, whatever those faces were.
What happened next?
Well,
Chet continued, now looking more anxious than ever.
I found myself at home, but this time something was different. The thing was mad. It had all the faces, all the children, all of them. They were there, all silent, all angered. I suddenly found myself free, and I made a phone call to tell the police that a head had been delivered to the house.
He paused. I reflected on the case, and true enough, an unknown caller had claimed to have made the discovery.
Oh, God!
I commented. What?
Oh my God!
He shouted, terrified of something behind me. I turned to see nothing. Nothing's there, I murmured. And suddenly, the man across from me began to scream as these lashes began to appear all over him, slashing through the dirty orange prison clothes, through his skin, exposing blood and flesh. And you spoke a voice, one coming from the man. Yet his mouth didn't say the words, still stuck in an eternal scream. Cannot. The prisoner lashed out, yelled, and crying for mercy. Stop me. And then the body went limp. Chet Adami, the mailbox killer, was dead. That wonderful performance as Chet Adami was performed by Vexarus. What a big voice for such a little guy. You should go check him out. Thank you for listening. You can probably handle another horror story, right?